In this video, you and I get to take a look at the centralized management tool to manage a vSphere environment. The management tool is called vCenter. Let's begin. In our sample topology here, we have 3 ESXi hosts, 1, 2, and 3. However, in larger environments, we might have dozens or hundreds of ESXi hosts that we have to manage. And it doesn't become practical or reasonable to have to manage each and every individual ESXi host as a standalone unit. Instead, we need some type of a centralized management tool, and that tool in a VMware vSphere environment is called vCenter. So in our topology, I've got this device right here that I've labeled as vCenter, and vCenter is actually a collection of a whole bunch of different apps and services that are running to provide the centralized management for our vSphere environment. So for you and I, if we're sitting at a single computer, we can connect over to vCenter and manage our entire vSphere environment from this single pane of glass, a single screen. And with vCenter, we can manage up to 1,000 hosts. And of course, when we say the word hosts, we're referring to ESXi hosts. And regarding the virtual machines running on those ESXi hosts, in vCenter, we can go ahead and manage up to 10,000 virtual machines. And that's a pretty big environment, all being managed through the centralized management tool called vCenter. And the way it works is we'd bring up ESXi hosts. So let's say we have 3, for example, here that we brought up. And then we would launch vCenter. And then in vCenter, we'd go ahead and logically associate each of the ESXi hosts with that vCenter server. So there's a little agent, or another way of thinking of it is a user account that is sitting on each of these ESXi hosts that the vCenter is going to use to communicate with as it sends instructions and configuration information over to each of the ESXi hosts. And one of the interesting things about vCenter is that if we want to deploy vCenter, there's a couple of ways of doing it. We could deploy it as software applications being installed on a Windows server, for example, a Windows 2012 server, or we could deploy vCenter as a virtual machine. And they call this virtual machine the vCenter appliance. And if it is delivered as a VMware appliance, the reality is that one of our ESXi hosts will be running vCenter as a virtual machine. And if we did it that way, it's very likely we'd want to use some high availability techniques, such as literally high availability. So that if this ESXi host number 1 fails, one of the other ESXi hosts will restart that virtual machine so we can have centralized management once again of our vSphere environment. Now, most companies that have a VMware vSphere environment have purchased the license for and are using vCenter. It's a separately licensed product. And there's several reasons why companies have purchased and are using vCenter. Number 1, it gives us that centralized, easy management of our entire environment, which is really cool. Another really compelling reasons why companies have implemented and purchased and are using vCenter is because it's needed for a lot of the cool features. For example, things like vMotion, DRS, high availability, fault tolerance, distributed power management. When we have features that are requiring the interaction and cooperation of multiple ESXi hosts, the reason that's possible is because there's a vCenter behind all of it that's coordinating and has instructed the ESXi host to behave in a certain way. So from our admin PC, we connect to vCenter, and we could take our ESXi hosts, for example, and we could put them into a logical group called a cluster. And then as part of a cluster of ESXi hosts, the features such as distributed resource scheduler and distributed power management can then be used across the ESXi hosts inside of that logical cluster. And the only way that we're going to get clusters of ESXi hosts that cooperate together is by using the tool that creates those clusters, and that is vCenter. Another example would be high availability. And as I mentioned, if we're running the vCenter appliance as a VM, we'd want to configure high availability for that VM so that if we lost a single ESXi host, one of the other ESXi hosts in that cluster could go ahead and restart that VM so we could continue to use vCenter for central management of our ESXi hosts. In this video, we've identified that vCenter is the central management tool for managing a vSphere enterprise environment, that it can manage up to 1,000 ESXi hosts, and that once set up, the vCenter is actually calling the shots on each of the ESXi hosts. So we tell vCenter what we want to have happen, and the vCenter communicates those instructions respectively to the ESXi hosts involved. We've also identified in this video that the vCenter services can be installed on a Windows computer like Windows 2008 or 2012, or we can deploy vCenter as a virtual appliance. And if so, we definitely want to use high availability regarding that VM so that we can continue to have centralized management of our vSphere environment in the event that the host that's running that VM fails. And last, we also identified that many of the cool features, such as high availability and DRS, are available only because we have vCenter to coordinate and configure the ESXi hosts to cooperate with each other in an organized fashion for those features. I have had a great time in this video. I'm glad you joined me for it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.